You mentioned uncomfortability in the church and how people are afraid to be uncomfortable, especially coming on Sunday morning. They want their coffee, they want their donut, they want to hear a exciting message that makes them feel good. And I think we just have a tendency to be afraid of uncomfortability. And I think bringing kids from, and I'm doing air quotes if anybody isn't watching the video, the outside world into their home. But what would you say, having done this kind of ministry for so long and having biological kids of your own and seeing that relationship, what is the benefit of exposing your kids to the hard worldly things
Sure. Yeah.
of the world?
Yeah. Um, I used to be afraid of the effect that opening our home to this would have on our biological daughters. Now, after the fact, I'm more afraid of the effect not opening our home to foster care would have
Mm.
had on our our biological daughters. And I think because the default parenting position for most people, especially in the church, is to pursue safety and
Yeah,
comfort and convenience and shelter
like
at
purity.
all costs. Yeah, yeah. Just we want to isolate and insulate. And so I'm
Yeah.
gonna. Here's kind of the bigger story, the bigger narrative that most of us are living in. The narrative is we are we are subtly and even overtly at times taught by our culture that when you see hard things, when you see uncomfortable things, when you see dangerous things, your natural default should be to isolate and insulate, to move away from them.
Mm.
And then what we see in the gospel is actually something quite different. What we see in the gospel is God moving towards hard places and broken people. That's what we celebrate at Christmas, frankly. So somewhere in the mix of all of Christmas is lost the fact that God in his glory looked down on the brokenness of humanity and said, I'm going to enter into that, and I'm going to wrap myself up in that, and I'm going to live among that, and I'm going to be broken by that so that they don't have to be broken anymore. Could God have just stayed up in heaven, snapped his fingers, and fixed everything? Yeah, but that's not how God fixes things. God fixes things by immersing himself in those things. Um, and so what we can't be is people who raise our hands in worship to that and then
Mm-hmm.
use those same hands to push the brokenness of other
Mm.
people away.
Yeah.
Uh, so there, I got a little preachy, but it translates not only into how we are as mom and dad, as parents, in terms of how we're living out the gospel and what our posture is, but how we ultimately parent. And so here's what I say to people is there, we want our girls, and they have been, to be exposed to some hard things. And there's a very, very fine line. And the
Mm.
line is not clear. And the line is constantly moving. Every day the
Yeah.
line moves. And every day as parents, we have to identify where's that line today? The line between we want them to feel the weight of this, but we don't want them to resent it.
Mm.
And there's a fine line there, and it's always moving. So our girls here's been the benefit is our girls grow up in a world now that they know is far more complex and far more nuanced than the world that most of their friends are growing up in, or that most of their friends are aware of around them, if that
Mm.
makes sense. Um, they've had teenage moms live with us. They've had little girls their age live with us and go. They have a sister who came to us because um, it wasn't safe for her to be at home, right? They just live in a different world with a different perspective and different
Yeah.
sensitivities, and we've seen that build empathy in them towards people in a way that I don't know we would have ever been able to build for them. So I say this: foster care has given our kids a gift that I don't think me as dad or my wife as their mom would have ever been able to give them on our own. Um, and we don't know how that'll translate into their lives as they grow older. But what we do know is that they've had implanted within them the reality that the world is broken and that redemption is possible and that we move towards hard places. And that's just normal. It's just what we do. Now, they've seen hard things. They've seen us weep. They've wept themselves. They've
Mm.
had cops at our house looking for runaway teenagers.
Mm.
they've experienced letdowns. They've experienced the grief of having to say bye to a little girl that they've grown to love. They've run
Mm.
the gamut on those things.
Yeah.
But the fine line is, um, we want them to feel the weight of it, but not resent it. And so there's been times that we've said, hey, as a family, we just need to take a break right now. Like
Yeah.
the weight, if we're not careful, the weight will quickly translate into resentment. So we're going to take a break.
Mm.
So we always have our eye on that fine line. And we've said no to some things that we didn't feel like would be safe for our girls or for our
Yeah.
family at the time. So
Yeah.
not being afraid to say no, always keeping your eye on that fine line, and then trusting that God is planting within them at an early age an empathy and an awareness about the world around them
Yeah.
that not only will show itself in some beautiful ways now as kids, but I think has the capacity to grow into some really beautiful things as they become adults themselves.
Yeah, totally.